Hello. This is Ron Kovic's brand new book, A Dangerous Country, An American Elegy. The author of Born on the 4th of July. Yeah, so it's a small but very powerful memoir of Ron Kovic. Now, you might be familiar with Ron Kovic in that he was wounded in Vietnam and confined to a wheelchair. And this is in early 1968 that he was wounded. So many, many years ago, he survives till now. And he returned and became an anti-war activist. But it starts before all that. It starts with diary entries from right when he decided to go back to Vietnam. This was the second tour of Vietnam. He volunteered to go back to Vietnam after being there one time. He doesn't talk about the first tour in this book at all and what went on then. But apparently, well, this one was much, much worse because he got injured. Anyway, he starts out talking about diary entries about how he was going to be going back. He's going to be going back soon. This is in 1967 that he's writing these. He's going to be going back soon. I think he went back in September, October of 1967. So he starts out by talking about, in these diary entries, about how much he loved the country and how much he really believed in the war. I mean, he went over there this second time as a real true believer in that fight and in the country and in God, actually. He was a good Catholic boy. He grew up in Massapequa, Long Island, which is an area that I'm, moderately familiar with because I lived out in Long Island for a few years, not that long ago. And that's where he lived, in the suburban setting. His dad was a cashier in a grocery store, and apparently in the 50s, you could have a house and a family and pull that off. He goes back to the house much later in the book after his parents have moved out. That's kind of at the ending of the book where he goes back to the house and gives the address. So I was able to look up the house. That still is there on 227 Toronto Avenue in Massapequa, Long Island. So he was a good Catholic boy. I mean, he's going to Mass, he's taking communion, and he's believing in God, and he's believing in God and country as kind of one thing. And he talks about God helping to lead him in this fight to stop communism. I mean, he at one point says that this is the most important fight ever for the United States. I mean, this is the extent to which he was indoctrinated into the war machine, into this not wise and stupid and wasteful and destructive and horrible war in Vietnam that went on a long time, killed, 40-some thousand of Americans, wounded several others, as we have here with Iran, and killed 1 million Vietnamese, whatever, the death toll of the United States war machine since World War II is a horror. And he participated in that phase of the horror. It started, of course, with the Korean War and then went to the Vietnam War, and then all these things that went on after that, and, well, the hellhole that we created for the world after 9/11. So, and continue to do so today. But so that's what A Dangerous Country is about. I was wondering what he was going to do, whether he was going to hammer in about how dangerous the country is, to really inform people who really still believed in America that it's not what you think it is. It's the most destructive force on the face of the earth. He does say that, but he doesn't make a big issue of hammering and hammering. He's showing in this book rather than telling, and his showing is quite excellent. So he's writing these diaries in his youth here before he goes back to Vietnam, 20 years old, and he is what, a captain or something? For some reason he's a patrol leader. He's found himself in a leader position when he goes back the second time, which means you could take this patrol of like 15 guys out, and you go out and you tell them what to do. So that's and he had these corporals under them. So there's a lot of military stuff in this that is kind of unfamiliar to me, because a lot of it was military jargon and so forth. But it's all either skippable or accessible, and you really understand that he's so indoctrinated in this stuff. Like at one point he watches The Sands of Iwo with John Wayne, and it's like, what, great, and all that. So he's kind of that kind of stuff is cycling through his brain, that he can be this American war hero, which, well, oddly enough, he did become in this other side of way, So now younger people, Ron Kovic is what, 5 years older than I am. So he's like 77 now. So he was born in 1946. So he was raised all through the 50s there, and I was too. And after, this was right after World War II, really. I mean, I was born 6 years after World War II. So, and that was so much in the environment at that time. It was all these war movies, all this stuff, the propaganda of Hollywood that was made for the 40s and made for theatrical stuff for the war was now coming onto television, and we as children, boys particularly, in the 50s saw all this stuff. Like I saw Sands of Iwo Jima and these other John Wayne war movies and all that. So, Darby's Rangers, I remember that was one of them. Pork Chop Hill, all these exciting names of these movies of heroic battle stuff in World War II. So when I was a kid in Ohio, and my friend Brad, we played Army. I mean, that was the main thing I remember doing with Bradley. We just sort of had like a little movie army of ourselves. We played Army, like, he was one character, I was the other, and we were like da-da-da-da, and, we were on the same side, and we were going through after an imagined enemy. I don't know who came up with this idea of play. We got it from the movies, apparently. But, that's what we did. And, it was really a different world for people who, whatever, born 10, 15 years later that didn't go through the 50s like that. And in places like this, suburban, sort of isolated places, didn't have that kind of experience. And, as I said, freshly from World War II. So we all, were just really indoctrinated into that stuff. Now, he is capable of sticking with it, or happened to stick with it well into the later 60s. I think by 1967, I was, really kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of losing it as far as all that stuff goes. But he was very much God and country, and he writes the diary when he's there as well on the second hitch, and all falls apart for him along the line there when he sees these horrible things go on, and like he leads a squad, and one of his guys, Wilson, gets hit in the neck and dies, and this is really horrible for Ron, and well, he reveals what went on with that later, but he starts falling apart as far, well, waking up in Vietnam to what was going on, and started saying, well, I hate this war. I wish I wasn't here. Why did I do this? That kind of a thing. But he's there. He's stuck, and it's called An American Elegy because there's a part of the book where he said he's a good writer. Oh, he talks about, he didn't do well in high school. He didn't do well in school. He didn't apply himself or whatever, so he didn't do well in high school. But he was always writing. He was writing when he was younger, too, and writing this diary, which he addresses to Dear Joe, which is kind of like Dear Diary, So he's off in the war, and he when he comes back, the real part of the book that really is touching is when he goes into what happens to him when he comes back, and fortunately it doesn't enter into getting involved with Hollywood and Oliver Stone and the movie adaptation of his first book or anything like that. He really just dwells or stays on his personal story of his struggles after this situation, which is repeated by countless other veterans, no doubt. But he was fortunate. He doesn't talk about needing money particularly along the way here because he's on disability, and he's like flying here and there. He stays in Europe for a while. He comes back, and he's always writing. So he's that's his thing. He's in a wheelchair. He's not going to be playing, well, he could play wheelchair basketball. A friend of his from the Army was playing wheelchair basketball, and he mentions that. But no, he was a writer. He's a writer, and he's a good writer. And the main body of the book is the last half, where it starts with An American Elegy, and he was planning on writing this novel, the great American novel called The American Elegy. And really what it is him processing what went on in Vietnam, and particularly the situation with Wilson, his comrade and the guy he was in charge of on this raid, and tells us how they were going forward and met some Viet Cong who started to fire on them, and they exchanged fire. He said, keep going, and then finally they decided to retreat, and all ran back into and got into a ditch for shelter. And he talks about that, and talks about the particular tragedy that sticks with him, forever, and probably still sticks with him, in that he was the one who shot Wilson. He describes how Wilson was coming back. He's already in, Ron is already in the ditch, and Wilson is coming, his figure is coming back with the gun, and it's dark, you don't know what's going on, and well, he shot him, and thinking it was a situation where it's going to be the VC or me, and it was going to be the VC. And this VC ended up being Wilson, and Wilson, who had a wife and a child, maybe a child, and was blown away at 19 years old by friendly fire, which is a very sweet euphemism for when you die by the firepower of your own forces, whether in a bombing or rifle shot like this. So that he deals with, and that part is really good. And then the kind of the it's very personal. This book is deeply personal and brave in that way, in that he talks about he is from his injury. He was hit I think in the neck or back or something, I don't know, whatever, but it severed his spinal cord, the bullet. He was shot in the foot and in the back or the neck or whatever, that severed his spinal cord. So he had no feeling on this side of his body and could not walk and could not perform sexually, of course. Fortunately, he had both of his arms, but he could feel this side of himself, this nipple. And he talks about closeness and sexuality, and how that has been taken from him by this injury, and wanting love and wanting intimacy and wanting touch. And he goes into a story about a woman. He comes to New York because a friend of his has written a play called Tracers. This is in the early 80s. This play Tracers is playing at the Public Theater, and he invites Ron, who's living in California. He spends a lot of time in California. He asks Ron to come back and see the play. So Ron does that and is put right in the front row in his wheelchair, and he says, yeah, I want to be able to leave, but they put me right in the front. Anyway, that works out fine. And he ends up going to another play in a small theater in the Village, the Playhouse Theater, is that what it's called? I don't remember exactly right now the name of that place. I don't think it's there anymore, but some like 50-seat theater in Greenwich Village, where the Public Theater is a bigger house. It's like, Broadway size. So he goes to this other play and happens to meet a beautiful young actress there, a rich one actually, who is also a teacher. And she has read his book, and she said her class is reading the book, and they connect and meet and they become friendly, and they end up adopting this sexual relationship. And he has a room in Times Square, Edison Hotel. I don't know if that's still there or not. I haven't looked it up. So he talks about this relationship with this woman, Mona, and how his sexuality operated and how intense the connection was with her, and how this was terrific for him, and how he'd become kind of what I think it's called polymorphously perverse, where any kind of part of you is, at least that's what I'm trying to describe, where any part of you has become more physically sexualized in your body, rather than centered on the genitals or whatever. And so for him, it's like stimulation of his nipple, the one nipple that he can feel something from. And this is the closest connection to any sexual part that he retains. And so he talks about the sexual connection with her and what went on with that, which ended up in a kind of a heartbreak situation for him, which throws him into the VA mental ward here in Manhattan. And so he goes on about his struggles like that. And I thought it was a very powerful memoir. I recommend it. It's very brief. As I was here a couple days ago talking about a book, and I'm a slow reader. You can see the text is rather large, so at whatever 240, 60 pages, I kind of banged through it in 2 days, which is pretty fast for me, and but that's also due to it being really interesting and really a great memoir. And I would recommend reading A Dangerous Country by Ron Kovic. Now, I haven't seen Born on the 4th of July, nor have I read any of his other books, Hurricane Street and Born on the 4th of July, and maybe I'll go back in and read those now that I know he's such a great writer. And I don't know if I'll bother with the movie version, but I think I might read the book later. So I heard about this book on, there was an interview with him with Robert Scheer. I listened to a podcast called Sheer Intelligence. Now, Robert Scheer is a really kind of important guy in lefty journalism, in that he goes back to the days of Ramparts magazine. He was like the editor of Ramparts magazine, which was an important magazine in the 60s, glossy, and had a lot of, it was great. And so he was the editor of Ramparts, and he's stuck with it all these years, and he's like in his mid-80s now, and does this podcast. Plus, there's a really good news site called Scheer Scheer Report, which I get emails of daily, which feeds me various articles of kind of this kind of thing that I'm interested in, and so that's Robert Scheer. So actually, this book and the one I'm reading now, Dorsey Nunn's what kind of bird can't fly, his book about prison and redemption from prison. I heard him also on Sheer Intelligence. So there's two books that I got from Sheer Intelligence podcast, both brand new books. Well, this is February 2024, and another library book. And so thank you, New York Public Library. And next time we're going to be talking about Dorsey Nunn's book, which is really good. I've been reading it today. And so thank you for looking in. I changed the name, so now I'm tickled to death. And I'm tickled to death that you took the time to watch and maybe listen to what I have to say. Thank you.